Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable and the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. RICO 12 is also a resource for the loved ones of addicts. I'm Justin B., a child of an all-powerful and all-loving, perfectly loving God, and a multidisciplinary addict living in miraculous recovery, and am blessed to be the moderator of this roundtable. I'm joined by David G. and Nikki M., and geez, we were just talking right before we hit record, about how we're hearing from people from all over the world who are being affected and positively by going through this big book line by line and diving deep into it. And just, we are also grateful to be just a small part of this. So what I'd like to do is just have David and Nikki each introduce themselves really quick, and then we'll jump into our reading today. David, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Justin, for your service. Nikki, always a pleasure to be with you, sister. I'm David G. I'm an alcoholic addict of many sorts from Oklahoma. Been given the gift of sobriety since August 8th, 1994. Really grateful to be here.
Thanks, David. Nikki, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nikki M., and I'm just a grateful member of many fellowships. And I love being at this table with my guys who get me, and just being part of this fellowship. On Friday of last week, I think it was Valentine's Day, because I'm a hardcore love addict, I entered the rooms 13 years ago. So, what does that look like? That means I came in and I haven't left, and I haven't done it perfectly. And I just keep trudging this happy road to destiny with these guys at the moment. So blessed.
Thank you so much. We are very blessed to be here together, and we're blessed for any of you out there in the world are listening to this and taking action as you feel prompted to do so. Today, we're going to continue in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 4th edition. We are in the chapter Into Action, and we will be reading on page 80 today, the second paragraph through basically the bottom of the page. And we'll be commenting, diving deep into it, and sharing insights together with each other and with you. So grab your big book, grab your highlighter, your pen, paper, anything to take notes, and get ready to get into action. Here we go with our reading. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator, guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up, made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens in his town. This all happened years ago. So this is a really powerful, hard experience, but one that I think we can dive deep into and see what that looks like in our own lives. David, why don't you start us off today and kind of share line by line what you gain from this and what you learned?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are right, Justin. This is a very powerful story. I just felt a warmth come over me as you was reading it, because I've done this sort of thing many times in my life. But I see how self is so at work here, and how the grace of God comes in and beats that down as a result of this particular step outlined in our book. Line by line, pretty much what you said there brings to mind the story of a friend while drinking. So he's in the disease when this takes place. He accepts a sum of money for bitterly hated business rival. So there is the resentment. It's just the bitterness that we go through. And I've done this with jobs and personal decisions, borrowing money, never expecting to pay it back. Just remember, when you go to make amends financially, they don't want your money. They want theirs. And that's kind of what's happening here. So he gives no receipt. he subsequently denies. And there it is again. Here's where self really begins to take the reins and control this whole scenario here. Having denied receiving the money, he used that incident as a basis for discrediting the man. So not only do I deny, not only do I hate, not only do, I will discredit you, I will shame you, I will do anything that I can to run you off or scare you off. But it says, he thus used his own wrongdoing. And really, that's all amends is. It's righting the wrongdoing that we do to other people. The rival was ruined. And I had that same situation happen with an uncle. He felt, keyword, here is where self comes in. Here's where it really tries to convince us, you can never make this right. How can you possibly make this right? Look at what you have done. Self sets me up to do wrong. It beats me up for doing wrong and then tells me I can never right the wrong. And that's all bullshit. Don't believe any of it. And here's a fine example of it. He felt as though he had done wrong he could not possibly make right. I felt that way many times with my wife after all the affairs that I had, after all of the things that I've done. But I can tell you that the grace of God is much more powerful and goes a hell of a lot deeper. It says if he opened that old affair, he was afraid. Look at that word. See how self is all over the top of this? He felt, he was afraid, he denied, wrongdoing, destroy. And look how many times those words are used. And this is how self is. So, it would disgrace. There's another one of those words. This is all self. It would disgrace his family, take away his means of livelihood. I mean, this is how the voice chatters to me. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? And I've made that same excuse many times. If I'm in jail, I can't provide for my family, this and that. And that is true for the most part. But I promise you, if they're dependent upon me to take care of them rather than God, they're looking in the wrong place anyhow. So what right had he to involve those? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? In other words, facing the blame is all those three words means, facing the blame. So look at how sanity returns. Look at the action he takes based on the steps he's already done. After consulting his wife and partner, now this is the one that he did the wrong to. So he's consulted with this man. He's consulted with his wife. Here's where sanity begins to return. This is where the God voice starts to drown out self. He came to the conclusion it's better to take those risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw. So here's the vision. First we take action, then the vision comes. He saw he had to place the outcome in God's hands, not in man's hands, not in his sponsor's hands, not in the hands of those in the meeting saying, no, you got every right not to do that. You don't have to do that. I had a sponsor once come over. We went through my amends list. I had 2 pages of amends. He narrowed them down to 2 amends. He told me you never need to make amends to your son, just be his dad. Something didn't feel right about that. I made amends to my son, and what I was making amends to him for wasn't even what he was hurt by. I'd taken advantage of one of his girlfriends that he really loved in the past, and that hurt him deep. But as a result of me doing that, as me taking action, then, we were able to heal from that situation. But this man sees that he'll start drinking again. And there's a pretty good, that's kind of the cheese that's binding, it's, and all be lost anyhow. So he goes to church. After the sermon, he gets up and makes an explanation. Now, he just doesn't say what all he done, but he explains his actions. But notice before he did this, at the top of the paragraph, he consulted his wife, he consulted his partner. He came to the conclusion, this is what I need to do. This is how God guided him to do it. He may not do that for any of us. I hope not. I don't want to do that. But I love the promise. Look at the promise. His action met widespread approval. Today he's one of the most trusted citizens in his town. And that's a beautiful, beautiful place compared to where he was at when Justin first started reading those paragraphs. So real quick on an amends of mine. There was a business that I worked for that paid me over $200,000 a year to work for them. But in my mind, that wasn't enough money. They asked me to do certain things that they should pay me more to do. despite the fact that I agreed to this money when I started the job. And that's nothing to sneeze at, $200,000 a year. That's good income. And so I stole from them. I took thousands of dollars from that company, sober. And as a result, whenever I started really working through this book, I came up on that and I had to make amends. And that was a hard one. I was very afraid, but I did finally, make amends as best I could. And that was wiped out. They said, it's been so long ago, there's nothing we can do. There's no trace of that. You made sure of that. And so there's nothing we can do. Just let it go. So I consulted with my sponsor at the time and one of the guys that I'd met out of Boston. And it just didn't seem right that I didn't do something. So coming home, me and this man prayed about it, came up with a conclusion a week later that money should go, part of that money should go to a homeless shelter for women. There's a whole story behind that and the abuse that I'd done there, and to a crisis pregnancy center. And there's a whole story behind that as well. But anyway, I did exactly what this book said right there. I came home, I consulted with my wife, we talked this over, and this is what we decided to do. And this was the amends that I made that had nothing to do with her. She said, yeah, just take the money out of the bank, David, we got it. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. What I am going to do is I'm going to work extra. I'm going to do whatever I can on the side to make extra money, and I'm going to save the money, and I'm going to pay this amends that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with me. And that's exactly what I done. I saved the money. I took care of that amends. It took me a long, long time to pay it off, but that action met widespread. And today I'm one of the most trusted citizens of the Crisis Pregnancy Center, of the homeless shelters. They invite me to come speak, to talk to the kids at Christmas time, to give them a toy. Man, they didn't even want me within a 20-mile radius of that place prior to this. So God is powerful, you guys. Don't slack on taking amends. This is very, very important stuff here. If you want to get right with God, get right with your brother. There ain't no other way. So anyway, thank you, Justin.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. I've got a question for you here in a little bit, but let's hear what Nikki's got to say here about this reading.
Well, thank you so much, Justin, for reading, and David for going line by line, because this is my story. This is the experience, strength, and hope. And as I stay longer in these rooms, I realize that I am you, you are me. We're just all having a variation of these experiences. And so, yeah, we all have our stories. And David went through this, but I'm going to apply it to my own experience, strength, and hope. Here where it says, subsequently denied. I have a story. That's my experience, strength, and hope. And while thinking, see, I'm not an alcoholic, but I suffer the disease of alcoholism. So while sober and thinking, I like to accept large sums of anybody's husband. I like to take anyone's husband that's available. I get real sick, especially at work. Especially at work. I like to take my coworkers hostage. It's like a game. And I'm sober doing these things. And it says, my liar, it's like Nikki used her own wrong. I can't differentiate the true from the false as a means of destroying my coworkers. I remember my affair at work with a 17-year married guy. And this is the one I was going to murder. We're in a union together. He can't leave, and neither will I. And he's a very quiet guy. And I had to destroy his reputation at work. Destroy it. Everyone knew. Why? We're going to read in a few pages that I am a tornado. We won't jump ahead of the book, though. I'm a tornado. And I ruin everybody, and especially through gossip and slander. I'll never forget, my mom told me when I was a little girl, she goes, your mouth's always going to get you in trouble, Nikki. And it certainly does. I gossip and slandered this guy. And I'll never forget, his wife showed up at my house and she goes, stop seeing my husband. And I said, I'm not married and he's not my husband. So you're going to have to tell him what to do. And can you imagine 17 years these people were married and I didn't give a shit on anyone. Right? This is me, self. I feel. And again, I can't differentiate the true from the false. My addict life is my only normal one. And Al-Anon's living out there. Well, look at me. It's not me. It's the alcoholics. It's the drug addicts. It's the gamblers. It's my sex addict husband. Whatever excuse you're using. No, it's me. This is me. And I destroy the reputation of myself, of my family. You know, my story is I didn't meet my dad till I was 18. And when I did meet him, I slept with his best friend. I'm a real sex and love addict. And so I destroyed my relationship with my father right from the start, sleeping with his best friend. That's what I like to do. I like to disgrace my family. And what is that? That's my old programming. See, my addict life is my only normal one. That's normal to me. I've watched my mom do it. I've talked on a podcast about being generations of women in my family lineage of living like this. And I love this next paragraph. After consulting his wife, go up to the top of the paragraph. It says, of this page 80, before taking drastic action, it says, we have to secure consent, especially if it might implicate other people. He had to get a yes. I had to, before I did anything, talk to my sponsor, because Nikki didn't have a husband. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not having an affair with anybody because I have no husband. So I can do what I want. See, my ego's real big. My ego's real big in this when I'm not connected to God. Ego, I'm edging God out constantly. So I love this. He went to the properly appointed authority, his wife and a partner. And then, I have to place, and I love this in our book. We're going to read it further on page 100. It's like when we place ourselves in God's hands, it's better than anything we could have planned. And that's been true for my life. This program asks us to destruct self. This is what this person had to do. This is what I have to do every day. And this fear, when I'm connected to my sponsor, to this program, when I see where religious people are right, the guy who wrote the Psalms in his special Bible was a murderer and an adulterer like me. And he was vindicated by God to be a king. And we still read his words today. So this is magical. See where religious people are right. Share your experience, strength, and hope, and see where your story, your personal experience relates to these people in this story. We're all one. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate both of your perspectives and sharing on that. I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask each of you. David, let's start with you. I'd like to ask you about the difference between, step 9, it says, except where it will cause harm to others. And I'm butchering that. I don't know why I don't have that memorized completely right now. But talk about the difference between causing harm versus making right. How do we make that differentiation there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Justin. One of the things that I was taught in going through this work and that I pass on to others is there's 3 areas that we need to take a look at prayerfully when we come to the amends. It's writing or clearing the air, making an apology, and making an actual amend for harms that are done. This is depicted when I sit down and go with a man through his 8th step list. When he makes the 8th step, I don't let him move on amends until he and I sits down and prayerfully talks about this, takes a look at what's happened with each one on the names. And we've already done this to a great degree in inventory, but now we're going to really look at, do you owe an actual amends? Do you owe an apology? Or do you just need to clear the air with this person? So the book says wherever, not whenever. There's a big difference in those 2 words. So whenever God puts that person there, I feel in my heart that it's time to make that amends. I don't shy away from that. I do it. And, it's just been a beautiful thing. But I know whether or not I've called you an asshole or I've actually treated you and degraded you like an asshole. There's a big difference in those 2. If I've just called you that, I probably need to apologize and live differently after that with you and other people. But if I've treated you like one, if I've hurt you in some way like that, then that's a wrong I need to make right. And I need you to tell me how I'm going to be able to do that. And as long as it's not illegal or immoral, I promise you, I'm willing to make that amends. One of the things I do every day whenever I go back to work after my days off, I stop in this store. They've got a really cool breakfast I always get and a couple of things, but I take a few $20 bills and I turn them all into fives and tens. And I'm all across the U.S. as a truck driver, and homeless people are everywhere. They're all over the corners everywhere. And I just always give them money. I just do, because I've been that man. I know what it's like to stand out there. That's part of my ongoing living amends. I can't say, hey, I hurt a guy like you once. Let me make amends to you, and that'll be okay. That'll clear me on him. No, I need to live differently. And if I can give some money to help out on that, I'm willing to do it. So anyway, yeah, there's a difference between wrong and apology, but you need to depict that in the A step before you ever begin to start making amends. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, David. I love that differentiation. Clear the air versus apology versus amends. I had never heard it quite that way, so that's really helpful for me. Nikki, question for you. Speak a little bit more about the importance of finally owning my own wrongs versus pointing the finger at others in this process.
Well, the book gives very clear-cut instructions. Like I always say this to everybody. I tell my sponsees when we're going through the clear-cut instructions. Let's go deeper. We've read this. Page 28 says, this is a design for living. So this is a book that will tell us how to live. On page 67, if you want no problems ever again in your life, you will live here. You will make this a working part of your mind. You will put out of your mind the wrongs anybody has ever done, and you will look always at your own mistakes. It says we are to disregard the other person, place, or thing entirely. That means everything that has happened to me above the age of 18, everybody. If you're out there going, Nikki, I was raped as a child, we'll talk about that later. But as an adult, everything over the age of 18 is my fault, says the book. It says, where am I to blame? Where am I at fault? And in other programs, there's other books. I'm not bashing them, but they don't have the clear-cut instructions. They say, what is my part? That insinuates someone else has a part. So your question, I can't even remember what it was and why I'm here, but it was literally, ask me one more time, Justin, because everything's my fault.
Yeah, difference between owning what's there versus pointing the finger at someone else.
How can I point the finger at anybody else if I'm armed with the facts about this disease, myself, this book, alcoholism? It's always my fault. I love this book. It says radical. Go deep on that word, listeners, radical. So if you're living a radical program and a radical life in a 12-step, fellowship, I'm always at fault. Actually, cut my fingers off because I can't point them at anybody. I'm always to blame. So this is how I live my life. Now I'll slip back into slumber and start blaming as we talked about early, the government and all those weird things out there. But the reality of it is, go back and it's so simple. I'm just not accepting life on life's terms, Nikki. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems. I'm always at fault. I'm always to blame. Boop, boop, be-doo.
Thank you, Nikki. All right, let's go into takeaways. I'm going to start off with my takeaway. That concept of clearing the air versus apology versus amends was really powerful for me. And I'm not the one making that decision. I need to sit down with my sponsor, with God, prayerfully decide, hey, who on this list, what needs to happen here? And if the action is indicated to take, I need to go for it and do that. So thanks for that. David, what's the takeaway you have from what we've discussed today?
Yeah, just real quick. It's found in the second paragraph, middle of the page that you read there today. We see that we have to place the outcome in God's hands, or we'll start doing whatever it is we do again and all be lost anyhow. So, this is all about getting right with your brother so that you can be right with God. For me, there's no other way. I mean, it's every book I read, even the big book, if you come to the altar, you got something against your brother, go back, make it right with your brother, then come back. I mean, this is age old. It just didn't start in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's a spiritual principle I try to live by today. leave the results in God's hands. It's a beautiful thing. It's amends. I'd rather hear an amends than a drunk a log any day of the week, because this is where the magic is. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Nikki, how about a takeaway for you?
After listening to you guys, I think it's just one word: action. His action. This is all about action. I can't just, as page 420 in our beautiful Bible for Survival says, I can't just sit and do nothing while waiting for God to tell me what to do. I need to do the next right thing and leave the results up to God. And however that turns out, that's God's results for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David and Nikki. And thank you all out there for joining with us. To learn more about RICO 12, what we're doing, how you can support these projects, go to RICO12.com. If your higher power is nudging you to support, consider doing so. You can find links in the show notes on how to do that. And to see what other things we're doing, check out the links in the show notes. We're all very busy in our own recoveries, doing a lot of things together and on our own, and all of it with God, or at least we're trying to be with God. So come join with us in this fellowship of the Spirit and come trudge this adventurous and amazing road of happy destiny with us. Work it. You are worth it.